There we go. So that should be, looks like we are live. Okay. So welcome everybody. Good afternoon. This is the first towing task force meeting with this group. I appreciate everybody's flexibility in getting this scheduled. I know it was difficult to get everybody on the same page and a time slot that worked for everybody. So I appreciate everybody's flexibility in getting that done. So to start off, just a couple of things. Obviously, we're using a digital medium for this. So just some general stuff. You know, there's some buttons at the bottom of your screen. You can do different things, turn on and off your microphone, your video. You can do a little raise hand feature. So if you had a question or wanted to interject in some way, feel free to click that button and we'll see who does it. And we can get that answered. Again, the meeting is being recorded. Yeah, just stuff you all are probably pretty familiar with anyway, but just wanted to get that out of the way. So I figured we'd just start by kind of going around real quick and introducing everybody. I'll start with myself. My name is Nate Riley. I am the Chief of Transportation for the Colorado Public Utilities Commission and have been appointed by the governor to represent the commission on this task force. Most of the positions that are part of this body, I've spoken to all of you, and I think I've described it. Of the 14-member body, 12 are appointed by the governor and 2 are appointed by someone else. So in this case, we have the appointee for the Colorado State Patrol and the appointee from the Attorney General. But that comprises the whole 14-member body. So we'll just go around real quick. I'll just go alphabetically by last name. So let's start with Nicole Bailey.
Hi, Nicole Bailey. I work with RBC Wealth Management, but I've been in the HOA industry for a very long time. And so I am here to help from an HOA side of things with the towing task force.
Yes, she is the representative to represent common interest communities is what the statute says. Let's move on to Andrea, who's one of our 2 representatives for the communities disproportionately affected by non-consensual towing.
Hi everyone, Andrea Chiriboga Flor. I also go by Dre. I'm the state director for 9 to 5 Colorado. And yeah, a lot of our members are mobile homeowners and tenants who have been impacted by different towing practices.
Thank you. Let's move on to John Connolly. He is our representative for a towing association in the state with experience in consensual towing.
Yes, John Conley. Conley's Towing here in Arvada. I'm also the state president for the Towing and Recovery Professionals of Colorado. I was involved with the task force when the governor decided to build this back in 2012 and 13. I got probably 4 decades of lawmaking and stuff under my belt. So any type of towing questions or problems, I can pretty much answer any question about the towing industry if you have one.
Thank you, John. Let's move on to our appointment from the Chief of the Colorado State Patrol, Captain Leonard Dittman.
Hey, good afternoon, Leonard Dittman. As Nate said, the Chief Packard appointed me to this task force back in 2019. I'm kind of the formal liaison, if you will, between us and the TRPC and some of our other towing partners. Look forward to working with everyone.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to Trevor Forbes. He is the representative for non-consensual towing carriers.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, Trevor Forbes. I'm the CEO of Towing Holdings, LLC, which owns and operates several non-consensual towers here in Colorado, Klaus Towing, Wyatt's Towing, Boulder Valley Towing. So excited to be on the commission and looking forward to working with everybody.
Fantastic. Let's go ahead and move on to Robert Hill. He is our representative for an association of motor carriers as consumers of towing services.
Morning, everybody, or afternoon, everybody. My name is Troy Hill. Actually, I go by Troy, and I'm the representative from Colorado Motor Carriers Association. I was past chairman a couple of years ago.
Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead and move on to James Howes. Jim, representative for insurance companies who insures towing operations.
Yeah, my name is Jim Howes. I'm president of Western Boot Inc. We provide insurance throughout the state of Colorado for small businesses and consumer individuals. I specifically have 30 years of experience in the insurance industry. And I also was on the task force in 2012. And I do have a little bit of a niche because I do work with towing carriers for insurance.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to Nicole Lawless. She's our other representative for communities disproportionately affected by non-consensual towing.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nikki or Nicole Lawless. Since there's two Nicoles, I actually prefer Nikki if that works for everyone. I'm a public librarian in Pueblo, Colorado, and I work a lot hands-on with folks that are affected by towing practices, and yeah, and I wanted to be a part of this. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Michael Pierce is our representative for mobile homeowners. I do not see him, though. I do not think he's here. And then also our representative for local law enforcement agencies, Officer Gregory Prunski from Colorado Springs PD, also called to advise he would be running a little bit late. So hopefully they will both pop in here shortly. Let's go ahead and move on to Mr. Rich, who is our representative for Consumer Tow Services, who also owns private property and contracts with towing services.
Hello, my name is Brandon Rich, and I'm the current president of the Colorado Apartment Association. And I was also on the last towing task force.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and move on to Jeffrey Reister. He is the appointment from the Attorney General who has experience enforcing Consumer Protection Act.
Thanks, Nate. Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Reister. As Nate mentioned, I am here on behalf of the Attorney General. I handle our legislative affairs and working consumer protection when we're not in session. Looking forward to working with all of you.
Fantastic. We already did me, so I believe the last member on the list is Joyanne. She is the representative for people with disabilities.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet new faces and see old ones again. My name is Joyanne Rusha. My day job is at ARC Thrift Stores, one of the largest employers of people with intellectual disabilities in Colorado. I also am a frequent volunteer and also a lobbyist for the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition and work on disability rights issues, including consumer protection.
Thank you. Okay, so it looks like everybody's here except for two, Michael Pierce and Officer Gregory Prunski. But let's go ahead and move on. Also in attendance is an Attorney General, Ruthie Harper. She's going to be doing a training here for us in a few minutes. So we will go ahead and get there. I also recognize there are some individuals from the public who would like to observe, and when we get to the appropriate part of the meeting, perhaps make some comments. That is fine. We would ask that you just stay on mute and observe as much as you want, but we will get to the public comment period at the end of the meeting after we get through all the logistical things we need to get through. So if you could please wait for that period, we would really appreciate that. Let's go ahead and move on to item number 2 of the agenda, onboarding updates. So as I've discussed with, I think, all of you, we are going to be issuing state email addresses to everybody on this board who does not already have a state email address. I saw an email this morning. It looked like it was to Trevor Forbes that kind of discussed this. It was the first one I'd seen. So I assume those are starting to go out. So please keep an eye out on those. They'll be coming from our department's Deputy Executive Director, Jenny Brown. So keep an eye out for that. It's just a form you have to review and sign, and then we'll get those state email addresses submitted to you. That will make things a lot easier in regards to communication, because I can send out mass emails to all those. And you can get certain things, documentations we might have to circulate, or information that needs to be traded back and forth, scheduling meetings, things of that nature can all go through that email medium. So hopefully we'll get that all resolved shortly. For onboarding materials, we have the DORA handbook that we're going to be circulating. I'll probably wait until you have those emails to send that around. It's basically just an outline of the department, how it works, where funding comes from, what authorities the department has, things of that nature. Once we do the training today, you've been issued your state email address and we've circulated these materials. You will be signing a compliance affidavit. So it's basically just indicating that we've gone through all the proper onboarding procedures to acclimate you to this new role, in this case on the towing task force. And then lastly, the board and commission survey, that's something that's going out to all board and commission members under the Department of Regulatory Agencies. I've heard that's going to be coming out in March of this year, so that should be coming out here shortly. I believe there's a description of what that entails within that DORA handbook that I'll be circulating, so you can keep an eye out for that. I think they just want feedback and what you think works and ideas you might have, things of that nature. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ruthie Harper. She is one of our attorney generals that works with the commission, and she has a training for us to cover various topics that are important to the task force.
I'm getting there, getting the slideshow going here. All right, so I am Ruthie Harper. I'm Senior Assistant Attorney General in the State Services section of the PUC unit of the Colorado Attorney General's office. And I'm here today to help get the task force launched by just going over some processes and procedures that you'll want to be mindful of as you go forward over this next year. As Nate said, there is an effort ongoing to identify dedicated counsel for the task force. So just my lawyer caveat here, this isn't legal advice. This is just training so that you can get launched without any further delay. So the topics I'm going to go over today is start with overview of the Public Utilities Commission, overview of the towing task force, the task force duties and powers, the Colorado Open Meetings Law, best practices for running meetings, ex parte communications, which I'll define later, conflicts of interest, and finally, the Colorado Open Records Act. So first, the Public Utilities Commission is an independent agency within the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies, which is referred to as DORA. The PUC regulates a wide range of industries in Colorado, including transportation such as taxi, limo, TNCs like Uber and Lyft, towing and moving, as well as other industries, rail, gas pipeline, electric and gas utilities like Xcel Energy and Black Hills, telecommunications, and water utilities. The PUC has 3 appointed commissioners. They're appointed by the governor for 4-year terms. They're confirmed by Senate vote. There's no more than 2 commissioners from any one political party. And the commissioners are the decision makers of the PUC. They have weekly meetings every Wednesday at which they're presented the decision points and the ongoing cases before them. They'll have a public discussion, deliberations, and come to a decision. And then there'll be a written decision that follows that memorializes what was decided at that public meeting. The PUC also has a large number of expert subject matter staff. Staff can act to support the commissioners as advisors. Staff can be parties in a litigated case. And then, as in the case was particularly the transportation injury section, there's also a large number of staff that help run the day-to-day operations and handle delegated matters. So these are the current commissioners. The chair is Eric Blank. He's a Democrat. And then Commissioner Megan Gilman is also a Democrat. And then Commissioner John Gavin is unaffiliated. And then this is just the large a number of sections that staff handles. And then there's the PUC director, Doug Dean, who handles the operations. So the PUC's authority to regulate towing carriers is set forth in, among others, these Colorado statutes. First, a statute that requires towing carriers to obtain a permit from the PUC, and then also a statute that authorizes and requires the PUC to prescribe rules covering circumstances under which a tow carrier may perform a non-consensual tow, responsibilities for the care of a towed vehicle, and then the minimum and maximum rates and charges to be collected for a non-consensual tow and storage of a towed vehicle. The PUC's adopted rules regulating transportation carriers are in the 6,000 series of the Commission's rules. The rules specific to towing are in 6,500 through 6,514, and these rules are available on the Commission's towing website. So I went through that background of the Public Utilities Commission because I thought it would be helpful for particularly new members just to understand where your recommendation is going and who's going to be considering it, and the processes that'll be used, and then what the final product will be. So that's the Public Utilities Commission. Turning to the task force. The task force is an advisory committee. It's also created within DORA. It's 14 members, and it must meet at least twice a year. So first, and I think most significantly, the task force has the duty and the power and the duty to make recommendations to the PUC about tow rates. By statute, the task force is tasked with making comprehensive recommendations to the PUC about the maximum rates for the recovery, towing, and storage of a vehicle that's been towed without the owner's consent. As an action item, the task force is required to make its first comprehensive recommendation to the PUC later this year, after July 1st, but no later than September 1st. State law instructs the PUC to consult with the task force when issuing or amending rules concerning towing rates. The task force also has the duty and power to make recommendations about investigations of overcharges. The task force is tasked with advising the PUC or staff concerning investigations of overcharges made by towing carriers. Specifically, the statute directs, at the direction of the Commission, PUC staff shall consult with the task force about these kinds of investigations. So with that background on what the task force is, it has the power and the duty to do, I'm going to shift a bit here to the processes that are going to need to be followed as you accomplish those duties. So first and foremost, I think as an advisory committee within DORA, the task force is a state public body subject to the statutory requirements of the Colorado Open Meetings Law, which is referred to as the OML and also referred to as the Sunshine Law. So even though it's advisory, the task force is still subject to these requirements. And it's essentially the same requirements that the Commission has, and that's why the Commission has those weekly meetings where it makes its decisions. Again, the task force is not as complicated as the Commission. So I think, the processes are going to be a little more straightforward. And what I sort of called out is the meetings must be noticed, they must be open, and they must be documented. And that's something that Nate's already taken effort for this meeting to make sure the meeting was posted on the task force website. Anyone who wanted to join was able to get a link. And then as part of the process today, I think there's going to be the selection of a secretary to keep notes about what was discussed. So this is sort of the most significant part, I think, about the Open Meetings Law, which is the definition of a meeting is very broad. By statute, a meeting under the Open Meetings Law is any kind of gathering convened to discuss public business, whether in person, by telephone, electronically, or by other means of communication. And I think this is a way, it's pretty easy to get into trouble quickly. For example, you start an email chain and then someone responds and then someone responds, and then all of a sudden you're having a discussion by email. And that's contrary to the point of the open meetings law. The point of the open meetings law is that discussions that are leading to deliberations, that lead to some sort of decision on public business, all of that needs to happen in a noticed and open public meeting. And the concern with having off the record discussions is that then when you get to the public meeting, you just go straight to the decision, and the public isn't able to follow and understand what the discussions and the negotiations, were that led to that decision. So this is something I think, if you take away one thing from today, is do not have, group emails about towing task force business. I'll continue on with it after that main point. So I guess a bit of good news is that, there is some reasonable limit to what a meeting is. And it has to be a discussion about, that could lead to deliberations, that could lead to a decision within the task force authority. So it's not going to include a chance encounter or social gatherings between members where there's no intent to discuss or actual discussion of task force business. And it would also not include emails or discussions about administrative matters like scheduling a meeting. So again, by the statute, a meeting under the open meetings law would include a meeting between two or more members at which public meeting is discussed. And the statute says that kind of a meeting should be open to the public. Again, so this would include emails, telephone calls. So it doesn't even have to be with the whole group. It could be with one other member. Because again, like that discussion should be in public so that it's understood how the decision was reached. And then the statute says any meeting where there's going to be a decision or an action, or where there's a majority or a quorum, needs to be noticed to the public. So that each of these group meetings that's going to be, set up today needs to follow these same procedures and be posted on the commission's website and open to the public. There are a few narrow exceptions, which I don't foresee happening for the task force, but I'm not quite sure where discussions are going to go. There's an exception for meeting with counsel about a specific matter. It's not just having counsel there. It has to be about specific legal advice or matters required to be kept confidential or specialized details of an investigation. So that's something that can certainly be addressed if and when it comes up over the course of your discussions. I think we can take a few questions. It looks like Michael Pierce has a question.
Yeah, very briefly, just from reading through the notes on the screen, I was curious if task force members, if there are other areas where they tend to gather together to discuss things that are ostensibly public business, whether that's potentially going to run afoul of these rules.
Well, I mean, that's hard to answer. I think that the point of this training is just to start issue spotting, so that you can start being deliberate about, really just issue spotting. So it's already successful in that you're seeing, perhaps this is coming up in other contexts. I think there has to be a reasonable line, but the point of the statute is that the whole discussion happens in public. And if it's, I've seen cases where it could be where the negotiation and the discussions happen elsewhere and then you just get to the meeting and say we all agree, like that's a problem. That's in violation of the open meetings law. So certainly something to keep in mind, and ideally the task force will get counsel assigned soon, and that's a question you could ask them, is some specific guidance on how to apply this requirement to your actual practical situation. So moving on, just some best practices for running meetings. There should be open and constructive deliberation, the majority rules, equal right to speak and vote. Only one matter should be discussed at a time, and a courteous atmosphere must prevail. And some of that is so that the secretary actually has a chance to capture what's going on and who's saying what. The minutes should show the time and place, the name of the presiding officer who was there, and then a rough record of all the business transacted. And then quorum is a term that you'll hear, and that just means more than half of the members. So I'm going to move on here to the concept of ex parte communication. And in general, an ex parte or one-sided communication occurs when one party to a case talks or writes or otherwise communicates with the decision maker about issues in the case without the other parties present. And the problem with this sort of one-sided conversation is that it can prejudice the other parties because they aren't there to hear what's being said and to respond. And again, this concern with ex parte communications or one-sided applies to substantive issues and not to administrative issues like what time is the meeting, or when is something scheduled. I bring up this issue mostly because this is an issue that the PUC commissioners and the staff must comply with by rule and by statute. The commission rules prohibits the commissioners and staff from engaging in ex parte communications, and there's a statute that requires the commissioners and their staff to avoid even the appearance of impropriety or a conflict of interest. The reason for this statute is that even a perceived inappropriate act, even if the commissioner or the staff was actually acting in technical compliance, even a perception of them acting improperly will undermine the confidence in their decisions and their decision making. So I raise this first just so that the members of the task force, in the event that you have interest or occasion to engage with the commissioners and their staff, just so that these are some rules that the commissioners and staff have to follow when they're engaging with you. As far as ex parte communications for task force members, this is an advisory body. You don't have the same strict restrictions that like a decision maker and parties to a litigated case would have. But it is something that you could carry forward. For example, if you have an extensive conversation with a third party off the record and that leads you to come to a task force meeting and vote a certain way or make a certain recommendation, it's something to consider, and that explaining on the record, that you had this conversation and you thought it was persuasive and here's why. But again, I mainly raise it just to urge you to, exercise caution in reaching out to the commissioners, but also more just to understand why you might get a certain response if you do try to reach out to someone. So moving into the area of conflict of interest, and I'll just say from the outside, this is complicated. for this group of members who are appointed to represent certain interests. So I recognize going into it that this is a bit of a murky area, but I'll cover it as best I can, and it's certainly something that I think will be worked out over the course of your meetings. Conflict of interest can arise when there's a conflict between the public duty of a private citizen and his or her own private interest. We're usually talking about financial interest, but it could also be something non-financial, like a personal, political, religious friendship or relationship that could be affected by an action. The Colorado statute does establish rules of conduct for members of an unpaid board, commission, council, or committee. And the statute prohibits such members from performing an official act which may have a direct economic benefit or business or other undertaking in which that member has a direct or substantial financial interest. And again, I note here, this is complicated, for these members because you've been appointed specifically to represent an interest. So this is something to certainly work through in the coming months. I think the primary tool that you have in this area is just disclosure. And I think this might be something that the group can work through together is if a member has a direct final interest, then raise it to the group and put it out there on the table. And then it can be decided how best to proceed. If that person can continue, with that disclosure being out there, or maybe to have them not vote on a particular issue. So again, this is just an issue to raise, and I think at least initially going forward, the best tool is just going to be open and to certainly raise to the group for discussion if a member feels they have a particularly a direct financial interest in something that's before the task force for a vote. So last but not least, the Colorado Open Records Act. This is a state statute that declares it's the public policy of the state that all records be open for inspection by the public. And this kind of relates, I think, a bit to the Sunshine Law. Again, just all of the decision-making, the processes, and the records are open to the public. A public record is very broad. All writings that are made, maintained, or kept by the state or any agency, and a writing includes books, papers, photographs, and I think more importantly for this group, anything digital, including emails. So this is, I think, one of the reasons that each of you are going to be issued a state email, and that is a way. And you can protect yourselves by just using the state email for any towing task force business, and that keeps your personal email and your personal texts out of it. So I guess 2 big points. Any meeting, even between 2 members, should be in the public. And then number 2, just always use your state email for any towing task force business, because the statute doesn't really care if your email was on your personal email or if it was on your state email. The CORA requests that come in would simply be asking for all records that are discussing this certain item. CORA is a very broad statute. Anyone can make a request for any reason. You don't even have to give a name. It can be anonymous. You don't have to state the purpose, so it can be for any purpose. And there's very few exceptions. The statute does list out very specifically the limited exceptions where the holder of the record can say, no, I'm not giving this to the public. like I said, there's a set of a very limited categories saying where inspection must be denied, like it's contrary to law, or where it may be denied, where there's a finding that it would be contrary to the public interest to release those documents. And examples are records of an ongoing investigation or information about witnesses or targets of an investigation. So the takeaway here is just expect that your public records will be released. And this is something that comes up in, my day-to-day work. Like sometimes it would be easier to send someone a text message than to get on to my state email address and send them an email, but just always use the public form. And then also just to be mindful that anything that you do put in that in your state email about towing task force business is potentially subject to a court request. So just, be mindful of what you put in writing. And that brings me to the end. I'll take any more questions.
Yeah, if anybody has a question, just like John did, just raise your hand and we'll get you.
All right. John?
Yes. On authority, does the task force have any authority to help representatives do law changes? There's a couple of representatives currently that are trying to do law changes, but they have zero clue what the towing industry is about. And with a lot of experts in this, it would probably be something good to tackle with the task force. But in when you went over authority, it didn't show much there.
Yeah, this is certainly something. I mean, I don't want to say no, but I would say that the topics that I covered in the training, that's the authority that's set out in the statute.
Okay.
It looks like we have Kayla has raised her hands. I believe that's one of our members of the public. I think we were going to try to save all the comments from the public to the end of the meeting, but if you want to just go ahead and, if it's related to this training, I suppose it would be fine to ask it now.
Hello. I had a couple of questions. Yep. Is it open for there to be a citizen advisory group upon the towing task force where the citizens would be able to conduct not necessarily business, but some type of reform where I can, take in the community's request or the problems that they're having and bring them to the towing task force?
So it sounds like that's, and Ruthie, feel free to jump in, but it sounds like that's kind of what our public comment period is for, is if people from the public, and it could be anybody really, wants to come in and make comments. I think that's a portion of our meetings that we're going to carve up or carve out for that purpose, for people to come and participate or voice concerns or really whatever you might want to talk about, and then that is heard by all the members of the task force, and then could be helpful in making any determinations we might make, or could result in some kind of an effect to the reports we would be writing to the commission.
Okay. I guess you kind of answered it. I guess maybe I was just wondering, because was this voted on just by just Congress by itself to start this committee, or was this put in somewhere for us to be able to vote upon the task force even being made?
No, so this actually went into the towing task force has been in effect since dating back several years. I want to say 2014 or 2015. I think it's 2014 is when it went into effect for the first time. Some recent legislation that was passed last year, it was House Bill 21-1283, essentially reconstituted the task force to the current membership. It expanded it from 9 to 14 total members, so it added some additional members. And each member represents a very specific community or interest group. And so essentially, we have all been appointed either by the governor or an alternative appointing authority to represent, again, all these different communities and interest groups. And then we essentially are going to kind of put our heads together and put a report or some type of study together for the commission to use when it's determining rules and different other regulations for towing carriers, if that makes sense.
And I just had 2 more questions. I'm sorry. So if you guys approved it between all of you guys, would it be something that could possibly happen in the future as to, instead of just having us on these meetings, because it's, the citizens really don't go on these websites to find out these type of information. And so what ends up happening is people, the lack thereof information, people don't know to go to the Public Utilities Commission for a tow truck. A lot of times is what I've seen. And so.
Yes, no, I understand. And I think that's why this task force is laid out the way it is, with different members representing different communities, in that kind of, I think they were hoping, the legislature was hoping for us as a group to capture the concerns of, again, these different interest groups and communities. And again, each person that you're seeing here, every member of this commission, this towing task force represents a particular, like I said, group or community. And so I think the idea was to get a wide range of perspectives to kind of put our heads together and come up with some ideas. I hope I'm answering your question. All right. Do we want to move on to Michael? It looks like you had a question as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand the notion of ex parte communications and the scope of it, and just trying to get a better sense of the limitations that we're facing with that. And so just to give a few examples of communications that would like a little bit more clarity on would be, say, talking to the press for one, talking with legislators for another example, and talking with constituents, perhaps folks like Kayla, or constituent groups. What sorts of limitations we would want to be thinking about when speaking to these different groups?
I can offer some.
Yeah, go ahead, Ruthie.
Clarity there. I mean, again, with my lawyer caveat of great questions when you do get assigned counsel, but I would think maybe I wasn't super clear. The concern with ex parte communications really applies in a court of law or in the commission's procedures where there's a litigated case before the commissioners and there's formal parties to the case, and one party seeks to meet with a commissioner and lobby them outside of a public meeting. So I think for the purposes of the towing task force, that doesn't apply. You're going to come up with a recommendation that you'll submit to the commissioners. You're not adjudicating a case. You're not parties. So that it would not apply when you want to go talk to constituents. That would just be, that's appropriate and not a concern at all. I raised it mostly in this context in the event someone on the task force wants to reach out to commission staff or to a commissioner about an issue. And even in that case, it's a bit murky because it's not an adjudicated case going on before the commission. This is most likely going to lead to a rulemaking. In a rulemaking, there aren't parties. So I would say I raised it, as an issue, but it shouldn't be something of great concern in your day-to-day work on the task force.
Yeah, I think as long as you're not speaking to people and essentially representing yourself as speaking for the task force, that's something we would have to do as a group. I don't know that any single person can be like, oh, well, I represent the towing task force and I think this. No, like we come together and we come to group decisions, which we vote on and everything else. And that is what represents the towing task force, not a specific individual in a specific moment. I think that is a little bit of clarification on that. At least that's how I understand it. Okay. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Ruthie, for putting that together. We really appreciate it. Let's go ahead and move on to item 4 on the agenda. That's electing a chair for the towing task force. So this is actually a requirement by statute. It's 4010.14033B is the statute. And it states the members shall elect a chair from among their membership. The chair shall set the times and frequency of the towing task force meetings, except that the task force shall meet no fewer than 2 times per year. So I'm sure we'll easily exceed the 2 times per year, probably just here in these first few months. But anyway, we do have to elect a chair, and so thought we could just go ahead and get that out of the way. Again, this person will be handling the meeting frequency. I think they'll be pretty much managing the meetings when they occur, you know, the scheduling, those types of things. So do we have any volunteers for that? Looks like
I just wanted to nominate you.
You know, and I would love to do it, but there's so many other things I'm going to have to do as it pertains to this task force. That might be a little bit of overload for myself. I appreciate the nomination, but I respectfully reject it because I just, like I said, I'm going to be handling a lot of the logistical administrative side of things along with our department. And so I'm going to be spending plenty of time on this task force regardless. And to add this on would be a little more than I could probably handle in addition to all my other duties. So I would really appreciate someone else volunteering for this. Okay, looks like we have Trevor throwing his hat in the ring. Anyone else?
I want to go on the record as saying I think it should be Nate, but if Nate can't, happy to help out.
Okay, thank you, Trevor. Anyone else besides Trevor feel like you might want to take this on? It's like I said, it's you'd be kind of the head of the towing task force, so to speak. Again, you know, you'd kind of handle the scheduling and determining the frequency and kind of trying to keep the towing task force on track. You'd kind of be the point person in regards to managing the meetings and the agenda and all of that. So any other takers?
I support Trevor. If he's willing to do it, then by all means, the job is yours.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and do our first official vote. If you all look in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you should see a little triangle square circle icon. Go ahead and click on that. From there, there's a couple different options there. You'll want to go to the second one down. It's polls. And let me go ahead and get that started real quick, and then we'll vote. Second, almost ready. Okay, so hold on, let me get rid of that. Okay, so this is just a basic yes/no vote. I know earlier during the training, I think Ruthie, you touched on just going with basic majority. I'm assuming everybody's okay with that. So I'll go ahead and launch this, and you should be able to just click a yes or no on Trevor Forbes for chair. So that should be live now. All right. So there is 14 total members. It looks like we have 10 votes.
Hey, Nate, this is Jim Howes.
Yes.
We'll see where I can vote, but my vote's yes for Trevor.
Okay. So that would then be, hold on, sorry, I'm trying to track this. Okay, is there anybody who has not voted or has been unable to vote? Because there should be, I'm counting 12, and we should be at 14.
I personally didn't realize that I needed to hit the vote button at the bottom.
There you go.
So just to tell everybody
there it
else,
is.
if there's two other people.
Got it. Okay. Trevor, did you have a question?
No, I accidentally hit the button.
Got it. Okay. Okay. So that's 11, 12. So that's 13 of the 14. I don't know if we're.
Yeah, I
might-
think I recused myself from voting from.
Gotcha. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Joanne, did you have a question?
Yes, I think, I don't know if it's a point of order, but this is why I didn't run for chair, because I forget my Robert's rules and Trevor gets to do it. But so when we are voting on anything, like I see we can do this privately, but like, will we also state for the record, I mean, right now it's unanimous, like, you know, who votes what for public disclosure, so that it's not just, you know what I mean, hidden from the public?
Sure. Yeah, I think we can. That's something, as Ruthie said. I think once we get an AG who's been kind of appointed to, you know, sit in on our meetings and, you know, give us some kind of sidebar advice, I think we can ask about that. The other option we had was, instead of people doing it this method, which I mean, technically it's private, but I think I get an alert afterwards. Since I'm the manager of this meeting, I think I get a little ping after the meeting's over where it shows who voted what. I'm not entirely sure about that, but I think I do. But the results are 12 yes, 1 no, 1 recuse. So that's all 14. So Mr. Forbes, you are the chair of the Towing Task Force. Congratulations. So now that the chair has been appointed, with your permission, I'd like to continue being point for the remainder of this meeting, just to make sure we cover everything, if that's okay with you.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So let's go ahead and move on to I'm calling it an informal secretary position. It's not technically something that's required by the statute, but I think it's a really good idea. It will help us comply, based on Ruthie's training, will help us comply with the statute that requires us to document our meetings and our business. I'm going ahead to keep the notes for this one, just because I had already wrote a bunch of notes, because I knew I was going to kind of be running this particular meeting until we got everything up and running. But this position would basically, again, it's informal, but it would record. This person would record the meetings, or rather the meeting minutes. You know, do things like track votes and things like that. So I was hoping I could get somebody to volunteer for that as well. It's something usually I would do, but like I said, I'm going to be so busy, you know, dealing with the administrative side of things. I'm not sure I'll have time to do it. So if anybody has any interest in doing that, you can either volunteer, or I suppose the chair could appoint someone if he saw fit to do so. I think it's a good idea. But I thought I'd throw it out there and see if anyone had any interest in doing that part of our meetings. All right, not really seeing anybody. So, all right. Well, I guess we can, you know, think about it, and maybe we can revisit that before our next meeting. So just think about it. It helps you feel a little more. Oh, Joanne.
Oh, I was not volunteering myself.
Okay.
That was me putting my finger on my nose. No, I actually, in another commission I'm on, I was voluntold to be a secretary. But no, I actually wonder if because it can be a laborious job during the meetings, if no one, you know, wants to do this, you know, within the next week or two, that we might even just rotate taking notes. So I was just putting it out there as a suggestion.
It's not a bad idea. Like I said, I'm doing the notes for this meeting just because I had already done a lot of prep work for it anyway. So I'm happy to, you know, once we get our state emails in place, I'm happy to circulate the minutes that I put together to kind of give everyone a template. Like, this is kind of how they probably should look, you know, more or less. I mean, but yeah, I mean, maybe it would be more consistent to just have one person do it, but I'm not opposed to that idea of rotation either. So anyway, so yeah, everybody just think about it. We won't spend too much more time on it, but yeah, just be thinking about it. It would really help us out. And, you know, it can really help you feel a lot more involved, you know, in your participation in the task force. And, you know, anyway, that's just my 2 cents on it. Okay. Also, this is something actually that Kayla had brought up earlier. about handling notices. So as I know Ruthie mentioned, I kind of took that under my wing to handle for this meeting. But actually, under the statute, these types of bodies are actually supposed to determine at their first annual meeting, which for us is this meeting right now today, on how we want to handle providing notice. We put it on the PUC website this time. We essentially just said this is the date and time that it's happening. It's happening through a virtual medium. If you want, and then I just provided my email address. If people wanted, they could just email me and let me know if they wanted to join. And I responded to those emails. I sent them links. As you can see, we've had a few people join this meeting. Is everybody okay with doing it that way? Or if anybody had another idea, I guess we're supposed to discuss and probably even do a vote here on whether or not we want to do it this way. It seems the easiest way to do it. And like I said, I'm happy to manage that, doing it for all our meetings to make sure that that notice goes up in time and that people are provided with the links if they want to participate. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Okay. Yes, Captain Dittman.
I would just say I'd recommend keeping it on the PUC's website. That's consistently where everything has been regarding towing.
Yes, and just to clarify, it's on our website, but it's on our PUC towing specific website. So that's where we encourage a lot of members of the public and also to the carriers themselves to go. And it's basically just a banner at the top in red saying this is the meeting, this is when it is. And again, I've provided my information. I'm happy to keep doing that. And as people indicate they want to participate in the meeting from the public, I'm happy to facilitate that to make sure they can do that. Again, I'm happy to do. This is the kind of stuff I'm doing kind of in the background for this task force. So anyway, I'm happy to continue doing that. Let me go ahead and we'll just do a quick official vote to make sure everybody is okay with this. So just go into that submenu again. It should be launched now. If everybody is okay with it. Okay, it looks like we got 11 votes. With me, it's 12. So we're missing 2. I believe Mr. Hill had to drop off at 1. He had let me know he had a hard stop at 1 o'clock. So I think he is, I guess, an abstention. Yeah. Okay, there we go. That's everybody. Okay, thank you. So that's 13 yes and 1 abstention, I suppose, since he's not present. Oh, are you here? Oh, okay, you are here.
Yeah, I went ahead and voted. Now I gotta go.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. So that then we are still missing 1 person. Oh, actually, wait, hold on. Yes. So we got 13 yes votes, and we're missing 1 vote. So okay. Well, that's a majority, so I guess we can just run with that. Okay, so moving on to item number 6, that will be to discuss goals of the towing task force. I think we have to keep in mind our statutory authority, but also keep an open mind as well, because I think the statute outlines pretty specific what we're supposed to do. But at the same time, I think we also have to keep in mind that we might want to explore some other areas outside of that specific mandate. Again, I'm not sure. This is another question, I suppose, for our AG council for when they are involved. But I feel personally like the legislature is their intent when they kind of reinvigorated this task force was to have us kind of explore a more wider range of topics, I suppose, within the towing industry beyond just what is outlined in the statute. That's just my personal feeling. But again, I'll just open it up and see if anybody wants to make a comment. John?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, we did the rates for for towing have been dissected for the last decade, pretty intense. We really need to dive into operations, I think, is where the keys are. There's a lot of things in operations that create a lot of the hardships that we're seeing. And I think those would be better avenues to travel down than where we're currently at.
Okay, thank you. Trevor, did you want to weigh in at all? I know maybe you had some other things on your mind in regards to, you know, what's going on in the legislative session, anything like that?
Yeah, just a quick thoughts. So this task force was, like, as Nate said, kind of reinvigorated during the last session, which is awesome. And super excited about that. There's some current legislation that's kind of moving through the process, but it didn't really have any input from, at least from the stakeholders I'm aware of. And I'm not sure that it had a lot of input from the Public Utilities Commission either, which sometimes makes it a little problematic because there's second and third order unintended consequences that they go along with these things, because it's kind of a complicated industry and there's a history there. So one thing I would put forth for consideration is that we, as a task force, ask legislative members to maybe give us some time to do our job. You know, we have lots of really smart people with different life experiences on this task force. And we have an opportunity to put some real thought and you know, some labor into what makes sense for everyone involved, right? But if the legislation is moving forward outside of the task force having an opportunity to provide those recommendations, it kind of makes the task force not very useful. And I don't think that was the original intent. So that's my general thought.
Okay. Does anyone else have any ideas? Again, I think we're really going to dive into this. Thank you, Joyanne. One second. So I think we're really going to dive into this a lot deeper during our next meeting. Obviously, this meeting was kind of set aside to get the ball rolling and, you know, kind of get everybody in place, make sure we've covered all the topics we needed to do and training we needed to do and all that stuff. Obviously, electing Trevor as our chair. I think we'll probably get into a lot more detail at our next meeting, which I'm anticipating will probably be sometime in February. But anyway, Joyanne, did you have a comment?
Thanks. And again, I don't know if this is out of order, but I did want to bring up the issue of accessibility. So I have a request, and I don't know if it requires a formal motion, but I'll just put it out there, that we also include on the PUC website, the website page that references the task force, also instructions for how to request accommodations. And so I don't know, Nate, if you might be the point person in figuring out how to get that done. But we do want to make sure that these meetings are accessible, you know, to the public. And, you know, sometimes, you know, people might need sign language interpretation or the like. I also, you know, I'm not a Title VII expert, but I also just want to put out there that we might also want to consider, you know, for some meetings or discussions, or maybe upon request, having, you know, I want to ask, do we have access to language interpreters as well?
Okay. Good ideas. I do know that this online medium that we're using right now does have a closed caption feature. I didn't turn it on, admittedly. That's something maybe we could do in the future that would help at least part of that. Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit more moving forward. I've heard that. Let me explore that kind of on my end on the administrative side of things. And then we can talk about that a little more
awesome.
in the future. But thank you for that idea. I appreciate that. Yes, Michael.
Just from discussions with legislators and other stakeholders here, it seems like there's a lot of interest in the task force addressing causes of tows, contracts, what goes into contracts, and issues relating to towing on private property, like HOAs, manufactured home parks, and so on. And right now, the charge that's in statute for the task force doesn't include those kinds of items, and I thought those might be usefully discussed. And I don't know if that would extend too far beyond that, our mandate. The other just suggestion is that there are some bills coming up and with another meeting in February, that might, I don't know if it would be appropriate for us to take a look at the bill and perhaps discuss the contents of the bill.
Yeah, I think once something like that, and Trevor, feel free to weigh in here. I think once we actually have something that's been introduced at the legislative level, I'm sure that would be a topic of discussion at a future meeting once that's occurred. I actually would not be surprised at all if by the time our next meeting is held, if there is something that's been introduced. That would not surprise me in the least from what I've heard. So yeah, no, I think it'll be something we talk about for sure. What we end up doing about it, or what that leads us to in regards to what the towing task force wants to do, I think is still kind of a question on the table that we need to explore a little bit more. But you know, I do think we have a lot of good people in this room. I know I've talked to each of you individually, and you know, prior to your appointments, and you know, there's a lot of good experience in this room. There's a lot of good perspectives in this room, and you know, I think we have a real chance to work together, both from the perspective of the towing industry as well as from the perspective of kind of this more consumer side of things. You know, bridging that gap is a difficult task indeed, but at the same time, I think we have the potential here to really get into the deeper issues that may be going on within the towing industry. You know, where each side is kind of seeing each other maybe for the first time, and hopefully that will lead to some good conclusions. I'm hoping.
You know, what might be helpful when we figure out when the next meeting will be, and everyone has their government emails set up, is we can send out the proposed legislation with some explanation, maybe some industry explanation on what's going on and why some of it does make some sense and why some of it doesn't. That way, before the meeting, everyone has an opportunity actually to review the proposed bill, because it's not something you can just glance at in a couple minutes. But I think folks would probably need some time to digest it. But it would be happy once we get everything set up to send that out. And then a second point, I think, Michael, to your point, we have a fairly narrow kind of mandate, and that's to provide recommendations, right? But I don't think anything precludes us from making pretty broad recommendations. And we don't have a direct channel to the legislature or anything, but you know, if we get together and decide that something just makes sense, I don't think there's anything that precludes us from making that recommendation. And if legislators, you know, want to listen to us, then I think that's great.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Did anybody else want to weigh in on this? Like I said, I just wanted to kind of make sure people kind of thought about on this agenda item. I just kind of wanted to make sure people kind of started thinking about, you know, what we kind of might want to end up doing. And it sounds like we kind of are coming at it from a lot of different angles, which it sounds like it's fine to do that. One thing we definitely want to keep in mind, though, is that our first report is due to the commission. And this is in statute. It's not before July 1st, 2022. So that's less than 6 months away, but no later than September 1st, 2022. You will note that both of those time, or rather that window of time is after legislative session is closed. And so again, I don't know what we think we can do, how fast we think we might have to move on this. You know, that's probably something, Trevor, for you to decide what you think kind of should be the direction or the immediate needs, I suppose you could say, of the task force in relationship to everything that's kind of going on in the background. Obviously, we've all heard, you know, towing is a very hot topic right now. I think we all are aware of that. You know, and the legislature has charged us with to kind of, you know, give this, you know, mind meld sort of, you know, recommendation to the commission again in this time window that's a little later this year. So it is kind of a quick turnaround time. So I guess we just have to think a little bit more, and maybe we can hash this out a little deeper in our next meeting. But we have to kind of decide what we want to start with, you know, what we want to tackle right off the bat. Again, considering by statute, we do owe a report to the commission, you know, between, I think, 6 and 8 months from right now. So just something to keep in mind. All right. So I guess we'll move on to kind of what we were just talking about, meeting frequency. I don't know. I kind of was thinking we'd at least have a once per month meeting, again, at least until this first report is completed and due to the commission. And again, it's due between July 1st and September 1st. So we got like a little bit of time to work with there, but I mean, it's going to come up fast. So anyway, Trevor, did you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I would propose that. Maybe we can take a quick vote, but I think at least for now, regularly monthly meetings would be great. And if later on we decide that we don't need that, then we can always adjust downward. But I'd propose starting with monthly meetings.
Okay. I'm considering it could end up being fluid. I'm not sure if we need to take a vote on that or not. I think everybody could probably expect that that's probably what we were going to do, especially considering this deadline for this first report's coming up. I don't know that would require an official vote, unless anybody has any objections. I wouldn't anticipate anyone would.
Great.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and dive into scheduling our next meeting. So sometime in February. So if everybody wants to pull out your schedules. And then we'll move on to our public comment portion of our meeting. And we certainly appreciate everybody who's possibly held on this long. We appreciate your patience while we got through all this logistical information. Okay, so I didn't really have a proposed date or anything like that. I suppose, Trevor, do you want to just pick a day, maybe, or let's see, maybe start the week of the 14th or 21st?
Yeah. Well, let's maybe just for this first one, maybe do a little early to get, we don't the legislation that's kind of going forward, and we may want to be able to review some stuff and make some recommendations. And so if we wait too long, we may kind of miss the bus. Okay. And so maybe Tuesday, February 8th, same time, noon to 2 or so. Just throwing that out there, but if anyone has any hard conflicts, let me know.
So that works for me. So that would be, Tuesday, February 8th, same time window, 12 noon to 2 p.m. Does anybody have any conflicts with that?
I can't make that.
Okay.
I can't either.
Okay, so that's 2.
I also have a conflict.
Oh yeah, it looks like we're seeing quite a few conflicts. Do we want to try a different day, maybe, Trevor?
Today's Wednesday, right? So
I was just going to say Wednesdays would work better for me.
That works great for me too. So we could do it Wednesday 9th if that solves that issue.
So yeah, Wednesday the 9th from 12 to 2. Any conflicts?
Yeah, I can do that.
That works for me.
I'm available as well. Thank you.
I think Dre, you were the one that doesn't work.
No.
Is there Andrea? Is there a different time on that same day, or is it the whole day?
I could do like 11 to 12 or 1 to 3. I can make work.
It's how about 1?
Sorry, 2 to 3, 2 to 4. Yeah, 2 to 4.
2 to 4 would work, I think. Anyway.
I was going to say, does anybody have a conflict Wednesday, February 8th from 2 to 4 p.m.? Any conflicts?
It's 9th, just for it's 9th. Wednesday the 9th.
I could do Wednesday or Tuesday from 2 to 4.
Okay. So is it, sorry, Mr. Rich, did you say you had a conflict from 2 to 4?
No, I was just clarifying because you said Wednesday the 8th. It's actually Wednesday the 9th.
Oh, I apologize. Yeah, I thought I said the 9th. Okay, sorry about that.
So I can't do Tuesday shot, but I can do Wednesday.
Okay. So Wednesday the 9th, that's 2 weeks from today, 2 to 4 p.m. Everybody okay with that? Sounds like.
Yeah, I won't be there, but I can get someone to sit in from the patrol.
Yeah, that's the other thing that I wanted to mention to everybody. We do have a provision also in statute, and it states if a member is unable to attend a meeting of the task force, the member may designate a person to fulfill the member's duties in lieu of the member for the meeting. So you can, I think we would probably want to do this in pretty limited circumstances, but yes, if there's a meeting and it's like it works for everybody. I think we're going to try to schedule these at the end of our meeting so that everybody's here and everybody can look at their calendars. And, obviously things come up and there's conflicts and we understand that. But that is kind of the emergency option within the statute, that if you just absolutely cannot attend a meeting, you can appoint someone to essentially represent you in your stead for these meetings. So that is just, if that's going to happen, if you're going to do that, if you wouldn't mind emailing me and letting me know that that's going to happen, just that way I can kind of work that in to the meeting. And of course, I'd let you know, Trevor, that's happening.
Awesome. That's actually really helpful, because getting 14 people's schedules coordinated.
It is difficult. It's I'm not even going to tell you how many hours I spent getting this meeting together. All right. So go ahead and mark your calendars off for, again, Wednesday, February 9th, 2 to 4 p.m. We'll go ahead and start with that. And, I think these meetings, we'll see what these meetings end up being like. They might drag a little longer sometimes, I suppose. If people are really into the conversations, we'll just kind of see what happens. But, kind of blocking off, what we can for now, I think will be okay. And, maybe we'll find out we need more time, or, we got to, I'm not sure what, but we'll kind of see how it works. This is the first meeting. We'll kind of see how it goes from here. Okay, thank you very much. So let's just conclude official business with, does anybody have anything else they want to put out there before we move on to our public comment period? I figured that would be the last thing we did. So does anybody have anything else? Any other members want to throw anything out there? Questions about anything? Anything else you wanted to proffer to the group? Now's the time. Okay. Seeing none. Oh, yes, Captain Dittman.
Sorry, and it's Leonard. Please, I'd prefer Leonard.
Okay, sure.
In this context, for sure. I would think that with the limited legislative session and the difficulty in trying to schedule this, I would recommend that we either come up with some regular rotation, or we schedule 1 or 2 meetings out beyond the February meeting. I just think it's going to be difficult to schedule this on the fly every single time that we go. I know it works better for me if there's a set date and time that I can work around. Just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I agree. I think when we get together on the 9th, maybe put forth a regular rotation, like you were saying, like maybe the second Wednesday of every month or something along those lines. But maybe we'll circle up a little bit more detail at that next meeting and get something like that down, so everyone kind of has some visibility on when they should happen.
All right. Thank you, Leonard. Okay. I guess we will go ahead and move on to our public comment period. So hold on. So I had 3 people reach out to me saying they were interested in public comment. We had Kayla earlier. Is she still here? I think she might have dropped off. But we also have Scott Bickle. I think you were the first one to email me. Did you have anything you would like to say to the group, please? Go ahead and unmute yourself. And if you want to throw a camera on, that's fine too.
I'm not sure my camera's working, but can everyone hear me?
A little bit. You're a little faint, but yes, I think we can hear you.
And how about now?
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I just wasn't sure which mic, whether it was my webcam mic or my headset mic.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I originally just found out about this meeting the other day after I called talked to whoever answers the phone at the Public Utilities Commission number, and my interest in towing just came up recently. My son was had his car towed out of a space he pays for. It was gone 2 weeks before he even knew it was gone. So you can imagine the invoice. It was over $1,000 when he retrieved it this past Sunday. It's a little, I feel a little conflict of discussing this because this was one of your companies, Trevor, and they have an agreement with Greystar Management at the South Main Station Apartments in Longmont, where my son lives. He was quarantined for a while. He basically didn't leave his apartment for 3 weeks. And when he found out his car had been towed, he didn't even have any awareness of it. I understand that towing operations sent him a registered letter, but the post office never got that to him. And again, because he didn't even, the mailroom in his complex is in a different building. So he just wasn't in a place where he had been exposed to COVID. He wasn't sure if he had it or not, wasn't able to get tested, but his sister tested positive towards the end of the Christmas break. And so he just stayed in. He didn't go anywhere. And the reason for the tow was the lack of his 2022 yellow tag on his license plate. Although his car had been registered, or I should say his tags were renewed in November, he just had not put the sticker on. And so what I'm confused about is, according to the Code of Colorado Regulations 723-6, which is the Public Utilities Commission list of regulations, there is a rule with a paragraph that says a towing carrier may not perform a non-consensual tow of a motor vehicle for reason of expired vehicle registration as reflected on the vehicle license plate. And that's exactly why his car was towed, because he didn't have a sticker on, but his registration was not expired. He just didn't have the tag on the car. So I'm looking for some clarification on that rule. That's Rule 6508, paragraph C. How easy it is for anybody to access that document, but
right.
I was able to.
I guess first, thanks for joining. We appreciate the public getting involved. In my capacity as like on the task force right now, it probably wouldn't be appropriate for me to like comment on my individual companies.
Exactly.
However, I know if Nate or someone, whoever at the PUC you spoke with, I'd be happy for them to get my personal email address, and I can have someone look into this specific situation, just because I don't know the facts around it, so I can't really be very helpful. But in that capacity, we'd love to talk to you and see if we can provide some insight. But in my capacity here, it wouldn't really be appropriate for me to discuss it.
Understood. And that just leads to the next comment, is that we might understand more why this happened if we could have seen the agreement that Boulder Valley Towing makes with Gray Star Management or South Main Station. My son asked to see that agreement, and they said, we're not required to show it to you. And I understand that's not in the statutes, that be a requirement. I do know that the legislation that the House members are putting forth would like to add that into the revised statutes so that that information could be available to the public, or at least to people who experience non-consensual towing. Mm-hmm. And it's just, it was like, part of it was a lesson for my son to, he needs to put these things on, but there were extenuating circumstances. Nate, if you had a chance to read my full email I sent you yesterday, I copied you on the email that I sent to the legislators who are looking to introduce this legislation. I don't think it's actually been introduced with a House bill number yet, but because I couldn't find it on the legislation website. But I believe that some of the things they want to introduce would help consumers who become, I don't call them victims, but who experience the unpleasant experience of just suddenly having their car towed just because their plates didn't show that their car was registered. And if they're in like the same situation where many people are in now, where they're working from home, they're not going out because we're at, hopefully at the end of a global pandemic. But had it not been for a pandemic, I don't think my son would have had this happen. Or if somebody from the apartment complex had notified him, and I still don't know the details because they won't really tell us who ordered the tow. And based on what I've been able to find out so far, it simply was because of an agreement between the towing company and the apartment complex gave the person who goes around and looks for cars that shouldn't be there or cars that might fall under this part. But it looks like the tow violated the rules of paragraph C 6508, or right. Sorry, Rule 6508, paragraph C. It doesn't look like a lack of a sticker constitutes an expired registration.
Right.
And we can provide documentation that he did renew his plates at the end of November.
Right. So like I said, I don't know if you, with your message to Nate, if you're able to get a hold of him, but Nate could literally give you my personal email address and be happy to look in it. But like I said,
that would be great. I mean, I'd rather just, if it can be resolved, but it brings up the bigger question, because I remember when we first came back to Colorado and lived in Windsor for a short time in a rental, we had a woman that was frantic knocking on her door whose car had disappeared. And it turned out her car was towed for the same reason. I don't know which company, but she was about to go, and she was a home health aide, and she was about to go provide health care to somebody in Greeley, and she couldn't get to that person because her car had been Well, it was actually her daughter's car she was borrowing. It didn't have the current sticker. Whether or not it had been online registration had happened or not, I don't know. But she basically couldn't go help the person she was supposed to help in a home health aid situation. So I know that's just two examples. And based on reviews, based on news stories that CBS has put out, it sounds like it's a big problem. And the legislators putting it forth, they're basically saying they're doing this because they're hearing from constituents that this is a big problem. So, I think it's a great idea that the towing task force has input to any legislation that might be coming up this session. And there's a great deal of, like Trevor said, life experience from all you people. And I appreciate all of you who are serving on this task force, because I know you don't get paid for it and it's time out of your schedules, but it's basically, I think it boils down, it's community involvement. And I think the community, we all need to get as involved as we can in our government business.
Great. Well, thank you, Scott. And like I said, please get with Nate, and I'd love to take in this particular situation and outside of my capacity here.
Right. Understood.
But I think Andrea wanted to say something.
Yeah, thank you so much, Scott, for that. I'm here to represent community. The reason why I work for a labor women's organization. We work on housing justice, but the amount of times I've heard of predatory practices in mobile home parks for tenants, is what drove me to be here. And so thank you for sharing that. And I would love to connect with other folks who have been impacted by this, to find a balance, because clearly if this has been on the news as much as it has, from the anecdotes that I've heard, this is a pretty widespread problem that does need to be addressed. And quite frankly, I feel like it makes sense that the legislature is addressing this. This task force is not new. And if they're not seeing the movement that needs to be seen, if they're listening to community and hearing that these practices aren't being revised, then that's when the legislators step in. And the ones that are folks that I do think are very well-grounded in community and connected to community. So it's unfortunate. It seems like that is happening, but yeah, thank you again, Scott, for sharing. And yeah, for other folks, I'd love to connect with you and get your insight as well, so we can find a balance.
Well, again, just thanks for hearing what I had to say, and I'll let the next person make their comments.
John, I see you popped up. You have something?
Yes. I mean, I really appreciate that, Scott. We hear this all the time. This isn't just a one day or something like that. This happens a lot. But the problem is you get the media and you see these representatives, and they use the big flashbangs and their consumer bill of rights. And they honestly, I've read the draft. There is nothing in the draft about the contracts. Actually, their draft is a disaster for the consumer. It's going to add $150 right off the bat. I mean, it's a complete disaster because they don't understand the industry. They don't understand the problems like this. I mean, there's a lot of little problems in the, how do you put it, in the operations of how things work between property owners and towers and certain private property rules and certain city ordinances. And there is such a vast problem there that we really need to dissect a lot of areas. And I think that the task force can make a difference if we tackle basic common sense areas to prevent things like this. Or at least if it does happen, give you an avenue to recover from that, to where you're not stuck holding the bill for that.
Agreed. And Nicole, I think you had your hand up next.
Sorry to switch screens. I think Brandon was with the apartment association. Brandon, I'm just curious from your perspective in this particular situation, what's the normal situation for a renter in an apartment, like what recourse do they have in that situation? Do they go through the apartment, or do they go, or is it just completely outside of the apartment complex's hands and it's like a towing company to tenant situation?
Yeah, so thanks for that, and Scott, I thank you for raising this issue. So just in full disclosure, in addition to being the president of the Colorado Apartment Association, I also work for Greystar, and so I can tell you that we do sign contracts, but the intent really is to keep the communities safe, and as well as make it a good place to live for all the residents there. So it's interesting to hear this, and a lot of times we will work with the towing companies. If there's a tow that was done, we felt like it wasn't fair, or there's extenuating circumstances to help get the cars back. But generally the contracts are put into place, and we don't have to be notified on every specific situation, because we want to make sure that, for instance, like fire lanes are cleared, right? If there's an emergency or something happens and emergency vehicles need to get into the apartment community to save somebody's life, it would be terrible for somebody to be blocking that. But I do think, like, for instance, the tags, if that's law, we just have to look at the contract. I wasn't even aware if that would be part of a reason somebody would tow. And again, I don't know what this specific situation was, but definitely outside of this, want to work to make sure that, we kind of clean that up, because, our residents are what's important to us. And while, the towing company may provide a service, they're not really our customer, right? Our residents are. So I'm going to be interested to follow this and see how it gets resolved, and happy to get involved outside of this.
Yeah, and Nicole, to I guess elaborate on what Brandon just said, just to make clear to everybody that tow companies don't choose what they tow for, right? We're working on behalf of the property owner, property manager, and they determine what type of property rules they do or don't want to enforce. So tow companies that's a common misconception, I think, with the public. That tow companies just decide that we're going to tow blue cars today or something along those lines, and it just doesn't work that way. The apartments do. As far as the expired registration, I can tell you one of the reasons apartment might tow for that. Apartment complexes often have issues with lots of cars. A person might live in an apartment complex, for example, but they might have 5 cars. One they drive, and then 5 others they work on. Well, that becomes a problem, right? Because all the other people in the complex need somewhere to park their car as well. And so, when you have, and often those cars will have expired registration for very long periods of time. So that's one reason why an apartment that has, parking issues, right? And then that's a separate question, right? The zoning and how many spaces are allotted and stuff like that. But that's one reason why. But I just want to make it clear to everyone that tow companies are not allowed to just randomly tow cars based on their own whim. They are under contract with a property owner, property manager.
So I just wanted to thank Mr. Bickle as well for coming in here and relaying your experiences. So Trevor, Troy Porres, who is our third and final public commenter, offered to weigh in on a portion of the rules for the benefit of Mr. Bickle, or if you want, we can hold off on that and move on to Kayla, who looks like she's rejoined us. It's up to you.
Trevor, I think Nate was asking if I can comment or whether we want to hear someone else.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Ms. Porres, go ahead, and then we'll turn it over to Kayla.
Okay, Mr. Bickle, just for your reference and for everybody on the task force, and Nate, I hope after I explain this will confirm that this is the PUC's understanding of the rules as well. But the section you're referring to, 6508C, it is titled Expired Vehicle Registration, and it reads exactly as you said. But then it says, unless the vehicle is expired pursuant to the terms of, and then there's a reference to a Colorado code. That was added in recently because there were some towers. Basically, in Colorado, you can't get a ticket unless, what do they call that, a grace period? And maybe our Colorado State Patrol guy could speak to that as well. But there's a grace period that's 30 days. And so even if the tags expired, say at the end of October, you can't really get a ticket until the end of until the beginning of November, I guess 30 days after. And so that section references that basically you can't tow until that grace period is up as well. So it doesn't say that you can't tow, period. It just says that, and I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just explaining that that's the current state of the rules that was added in the last time there was a rulemaking.
And right, and I did reference those two statutes, 42.3.114 and 42.3.204, and the first one basically referred to that you shouldn't be operating your vehicle on a Colorado highway if you have expired tags, even if you, and it doesn't really say whether you've actually renewed your tags online and you don't have your tags to place on your plate or not, but it just, in my son's case, he was parked in a private space, a space he pays for. He only pays for one space, but he pays Greystar $20 a month to be able to have a space at their apartment complex. And he works from home now that the pandemic started, and now that's permanent. And he often, his vehicle isn't visible from his window. It's on the complete opposite side of the complex. And he just, needing to be in quarantine, not feeling well himself. He had also basically exhausted himself. He helped us do some pre-evacuation work because my parents were 2 miles from the fires, the Marshall fires, back just before New Year's. So he had been down there with us. And once he went back home that night, after we kept a watch on the southern horizon all night, he just was exhausted. So he just didn't go out for 3 weeks, but his registration had been renewed at the time he was towed on January 7th. And then he didn't know it had been towed until January 22nd because the notification system fell through the cracks. Nobody from the apartment complex notified him. He simply was on his way finally to get out and get measured for a tuxedo since he's in a wedding this spring, and his car wasn't there. And again,
Okay.
we'll talk about that later, Trevor. And but I just, in terms of the rules, these two terms in 42.3.14, I didn't see any language that constitutes a missing tag being the reason that a tow driver or an apartment complex administrator would say this vehicle's plates are expired. I would think they would need to actually look, on the Department of Revenue's, if there's some kind of link into the Department of Revenue to determine whether a tag's actually expired or not.
Thank you, Mr. Bickle. If I could say just a couple other things. There is no such database that tow companies can access, one. And two, it's not my place or anything else to talk about your tow right now, but so in the situation for son, I agree that I'm sympathetic to that. I was just trying to clarify that in the historic rulemaking here, that was added with the intent that towers wait at least the grace period before their tow for expired tags. One other quick point, I would just ask everyone on the commission to consider, we've just barely scratched the surface here of the millions, hundreds, lots of issues that need to be discussed. And I love the idea that there's stakeholders about. I would just ask the task force to consider, as a unified task force, reaching out to the legislatures and saying, while asking the legislator actually to expand the bill this year perhaps could be used to expand the areas that the task force will have some authority over. Because as you saw earlier with the secretary or the attorney, the area the task force has been actually legislated is very tiny. And we've just scratched the surface, but it seems like there's lots of things that the task force can talk about with all the stakeholders at the table and would be very useful. And so obviously I'm not in the task force, but I would recommend that all of you consider perhaps saying in a unified voice to the legislators, hey, why don't we expand the task force in terms of what the task force can work on? And then by the end of this year, we'll have some recommendations for legislation in coming years. So that's my comment. I'll leave it with that.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Porras. Kayla, I see your hand up.
Okay, yes. I'm sorry about that. So I just had a little bit of a request, or maybe a question. If a person is parked in a parking spot in a specific personal private property, let's say, and the slots are allotted just for only the residents, and then they have a side just for the visitors to park in. The postings of the tow truck company isn't always necessarily right there at the front of the entrance of every exit. And that's what I read online is that they're supposed to be at every exit for you to be able to verify who the tow company is, their phone number, and where you can retrieve your vehicle. Not also too on the contract that the property owner and the tow truck company has together. The requirements that the PUC has on there and the requirements of certain tow companies don't match up. And so what ends up happening is when you try to recite, something from the PUC, they always say, no, we are in compliance. And if I can show you guys, can you see? Oh, maybe I should just turn it off. Okay. Can you guys see me?
No.
No, not yet. Okay. Oh, okay, here we go. Okay, I don't know what's going on here. But I was just looking at just a couple of the tow truck companies' contracts with the properties, and the requirements that the PUC has and what is actually on the contract is two totally different things. So then, how is a person whose personal property has been towed, how are they supposed to validate or make the tow truck company actually upstand to the rules and regulations that are on the PUC website? Because it says, it needs to have the date that it was contracted, the date that it started and it ended. And so if it doesn't have all of that, then the fees are supposed to be returned to the property owner or not charged at all. So how is a citizen supposed to actually use the rules and regulations and actually make them adhere to it? Because you can tell them all you want to, but unfortunately they will go ahead and call it an administration fee, or we don't have to put that in there. We know what the PUC says, but in all actuality, their contract clearly does not state what needs to be there.
Right. So I think I understand your questions. I think the first one was in reference to signage on the property, and the answer is generally yes. So there are some exceptions with cars that are abandoned, for example. So like at your house, if someone abandoned your car there, you wouldn't be expected to have signage, call and get that car towed. But 99% of the time, the answer is yes. The towing company is required to have signs at all entrances. And actually that's something, and Nate can go into this a little bit possibly, but the PUC, it's a very common violation that the PUC might find, right? That the signage is not in compliance. And so the answer is yes. Generally speaking, signage does have to be in place at all entrances to the property. The second part of your question, I believe, was kind of like, what recourse does the consumer have, right? If they believe the company broke a rule, and the answer would be the Public Utilities Commission. And so Nate actually has, like, his staff has full-time employees, and what they do is they receive complaints from consumers that were towed that say, hey, I either this happened and I think it's wrong, or I just think maybe something was wrong. And then Nate's staff actually reaches out to the tow company. The tow company by law has to provide that information, documentation on the contract and all that stuff to the Public Utilities Commission, and they will determine if authorization in fact was correct and all the rules were followed and all that. And so that is the kind of the formal process that somebody has, is the staff at PUC. That's literally their job. to do that. And I'd also just mention well, and I guess this is for the task force in general, that the question on authorization on tows, that the tow company authorized it. In other words, there is a contract between the tow company and the property. It allows the Public Utilities Commission to have a lot of jurisdiction, right? Because they regulate tow companies. And so, for one of my tow companies, for example, Nate or one of his staff, can reach out and they can request information. I do and have to provide that to them. In a situation where the tow companies are not allowed to do that, it takes the enforcement mechanism kind of away from the Public Utilities Commission, because the Public Utilities Commission doesn't have jurisdiction over private property owners. And so there's a little problem there with kind of the PUC's kind of authority and what they can and can't do depending on which situation that was. But yes, if somebody does get towed and they think that there was something improper, then they should file a complaint with the Public Utilities Commission, and the staff there, the Public Utilities Commission, will thoroughly investigate. Is that right, Nate?
Yes, Kayla, this is Nate, and I am the Chief of Transportation for the Colorado PUC. It's largely as Trevor described, and we get complaints all the time about a range of different issues. Towing carriers actually have, I want to say it's 19 pages worth of rules that apply to them, and some are more common than others in regards to violations we might see. But the majority of investigations and enforcement actions we take are through people like you, who will experience something and essentially reach out to us and say, okay, I got towed on this date, and I had a problem with XYZ, whatever you thought was the issue. And again, we do have many rules that can potentially pertain to your circumstances. Sometimes we have people call and complain about things that just are outside the scope of our rules. We'll explore that. I mean, we look at every complaint that comes in, regardless of the cause. But there are some that we can pursue and again, if the evidence is there that a tow was performed in violation of many of our rules, then there is usually some kind of a consumer recourse that we can pursue in that regard. So yeah, that is pretty much how it lays out.
Okay. And also, I just had one more question. I've seen a lot of times that the stickers that go on the vehicles, like a 24-hour notice for the property, the person whose car that they are getting ready to tow out, they have a sticker. Some properties I've seen, they have stickers on the cars that give the person 24 hours to move the vehicle before it is towed. So that, I guess, that's kind of good though, because it's some type of notification to know that, hey, your car is in the wrong position. Because a lot of times the residents at the apartment buildings end up having their friends and family come over, and they tell them, I'll just park right there, because nobody ever parks in that spot, and then boom, somebody's towed. And then you're like, okay, well, it doesn't say that in your contract, or is that in your lease? And so I was just wondering, are you guys going to eventually or later on or discuss the notification being mandatory before you remove a vehicle out of a private parking lot? Because the notification is helpful. Sometimes people are only upstairs for 5-10 minutes, and that sticker will let them know that this is not obviously the spot that you need to be parking in.
That is something that we'll consider, the task force will consider, certain violations. And I can tell you that for expired registration, for example, I can't tell you that there isn't a tow company who has done this. I can only speak to mine, to be honest with you. But I can tell you it's not industry practice to immediately tow a car for an expired registration, for example. It is industry practice to put a warning on a car for some period of time, 48, 72 hours or whatever. And to be honest, it kind of goes back to who's actually, making the rules. The apartment complexes also, or a shopping center or whatever, don't want the residents constantly getting towed, right? Like, it's not good for business for them. And so it'd be a very rare occurrence that a property owner or property manager would want to not have a warning like that. But in certain violations, I think that is something that the task force can and should talk about and discuss at our upcoming meetings if there are some things like that that would make sense to recommend for sure.
Okay, and then as far as the contract goes between the property manager and the tow truck company, if the citizen asks for the verification of the contract, because it states that only certain authorized users of the property can actually authorize the tow to be that car to be towed off of the lot if it's in private parking. So if if there is a contract that states how, you know, what people are allowed to sign for the authorization of the tow, where is, I mean, because the only person that really can certify that is between the tow company and the property manager, but in all actuality it kind of hinders the other person, the actual owner of the vehicle, because then they can't verify if in the authorization that the person that signed for it was actually authorized to give the tow or not.
Right. And that's where the Public Utilities Commission comes in. So that's something that we would look at in a complaint, is to confirm that, yes, there was a contract in place and it was valid. And so whoever did authorize the tow is somebody who could, and they do their due diligence and they check that stuff out. The reason, or one of the reasons that the actual agreement or the contract wouldn't just be kind of given to the person who drove the car, just quite frankly, it's unfortunate, but it's a safety issue. So if you're a leasing agent or a property manager or something like that, and you had to have a car towed, sometimes when people get towed, they get very angry. And 99% of the people who get towed are having a bad day, but they're not, you know, violent people or going to do anything, you know, that might be dangerous. But unfortunately, that's not. And so putting the names of people out there who asked for a car to be towed off private property is kind of a safety concern. But the good thing is the Public Utilities Commission does check that. So if someone files a complaint, the department, the PUC who handles this, does in fact look at that and make sure that the authorized signer was someone who could authorize that tow. Real quick, Kate, just in the interest of time, we may move on unless you have something, something else quickly. We'd like to move on. I would say that Caleb brings up a good.
That's fine.
Okay, awesome. I will say thank you very much, Kayla. You bring up a really good point that I think is something that we can do something about here at the task force. I do think we have a problem with a lack of transparency on the side of the public on what the rules are, right? And right now you kind of have to go to the PUC website, but the rules are kind of buried in a very kind of legal manner that, like, you know, I understand because I read them all the time, right?
Right.
Person doesn't have time to go get a law, read the rules. And so that's something I think that could be a recommendation that we should consider, is the Public Utilities Commission having some the rules outlined in very straightforward layman's terms, so the public can look without having to dig through a bunch of legal documents and sources. So I think you make up a good point. We really appreciate you coming on and providing your perspective. John, I see you with your hand up.
I'm more than willing to volunteer.
No, Trevor, you answered that quite a bit. I was just wanting to touch on why that rules was changed to protect people after we had that property manager lady almost killed it in Boulder.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are some things, some rules and things that tow companies do that at face value to the customer maybe sometimes seem silly. They're like, well, just give me the name and the number of the person who had me get towed. And for most people, that would be okay, right? But you know, there's responsibility for the safety of the person on the other side of that transaction as well. And so often that's the reason why, and that can be a source of frustration. Awesome. Nate, do we have anyone else? Public comment real quick before we wrap up.
So I had somebody email me late, and I did send them the link, and I actually just saw them pop in. I don't know that they actually came in though. It was what was the name? It was Noah Montoya. I'm not seeing him on the list though, so I don't know if he actually got in or not. I did approve it for him to come in, but I'm not seeing him. Other than that, I wasn't sure if Troy Porras covered everything he wanted to cover in his earlier comments.
I'm not sure if he's still on.
He's still here. I see him.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you saying that, Nate. But I think I didn't really have any. I just wanted to listen in. I wanted to respond to Mr. I forgot his last name. comment about expired tags. And then just the recommendation I made before that I think I'm excited about a task force where you got all the stakeholders at the table, but I would really recommend, I'm worried with the current legislation that frankly doesn't make any sense. It'd be bad for consumers. And so I just would again recommend that at least perhaps for the next meeting that the task force consider asking the legislature to give the task force time to do its work. And I'll leave it at that.
Oh, Michael, I see your hand up.
Sure. I would, if I could, Troy, if you could write down any kind of detailed comments you have with issues you have with the bill drafts that you've seen, that might help us get the discussion moving.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a great idea. I understand we're it's first meeting, so we may go over a little bit, but I think that's okay. And then obviously, if anyone has some prior commitments, they need to jump off. That's okay too. But Troy, if you have time, you might be able to provide some insight into the current legislation, which will get everyone somewhat oriented to it, and then we can provide the actual bill later on when we get our emails up. But that might get the juices flowing on everyone kind of thinking about that before our next meeting, if you have time.
Yeah, I can do that. I haven't prepared. I know Mr. Connolly, as part of the association, has done some work around that, and I believe, and John, I don't know if you're prepared, but I believe the association even talked a little about that. I'll just say off the top of my head, the very beginning of the bill, the first thing it does was to change the notification requirement. So just so everybody understands the current status quo, there is, and maybe I'll turn my camera on for a second. Feel weird talking. Hang on one second. Let's see. That work? Yeah. Okay. So everyone understands the current bill. The first thing it did is changed it so that the notification requirement right now, when someone's been towed, 99% of people know their car has been towed because they notice it's not there, or the sign is there, and they come outside and their car's not there. And so between the current law says between two days and 10 days, you have to send certified mail, and you have to send it to the lien holders, to the various addresses. Often there's 3 or 4 or more people that need the letters. And so there's a real expense associated with that. I think each letter, I don't know exactly, but it's $7 or $10. And so there's an expense associated with that. And the rules allow a significant to be reimbursed for that expense. So just as an example, what makes sense is, the bill as proposed basically says that needs to happen for every car that's towed, like the minute it's towed. And so what will happen is, as soon as if the bill as passed happens, then as soon as every car is towed, letters will get sent and fees will be incurred. And so I don't think that was the intention of the legislature. That's just one example. There are, like, and I'm not exaggerating, I think there's 8 different subjects that are kind of covered in the bill. And frankly, it's just super obvious that the legislators, and I was involved in a call with them, really have no idea about the way towing works. And, they're responding sort of haphazardly to some complaints. And so my point is, and I just said as one example, is that, as the task force, you guys can debate, well, should we mail letters immediately? And if so, who's going to pay for it? And how's that going to work? And whatever, and then make that recommendation. But the bill as written will be bad for consumers, is mostly my observation about that. And that's why, again, I'll just say one more time, I would suggest sooner rather than later that the task force basically communicate to the legislatures and say, hey, we're all here together now. We're going to work on things. We're going to make recommendations. In fact, why don't you give us more power to make recommendation? Because if you read the current statute really clearly, as the woman from the Attorney General's office said earlier, it really just allows you to opine mostly about rates. And mostly you can opine about whatever you want, I suppose. But as a legal matter, you're only allowed to do that. And so I think that you should tell the legislature that you need more authority, more power, and have them run a bill that basically says, we want the towing task force to consider all of the following areas, notification, signage, expired tax, whatever, and then you'll have yourself a topic of agendas that you can debate about. So I'm happy to answer questions about that or comments or whatever else, but that's my thoughts.
I think he's calling on you, Joanne. You were muted, Trevor.
Sorry. Thank you. So thank you, Tony, for your comments. And I want to preface this by saying, like, I appreciate you and where you're come from and your experiences, but I would just like to caution against impugning the motives of legislators who, do have demonstrated longstanding commitments to their communities and consumer protection issues. It might be that there, are things that can be learned or we can come to better understanding, but I guess and I could appreciate that we have, pending legislation or potential legislation that'll be introduced soon. I just want to ask, like, do other members of this commission have the draft that we have been referencing? Because I kind of hesitate. I've seen it, or I've seen a draft, but I kind of hesitate getting too far into something when we might not all be on the same page, might not all be looking at the same thing. And also, I would suggest that at our next meeting, Trevor, you might want to consider inviting sponsors of the bill to come and address their bill, and we can talk to them directly and maybe, address some concerns. So I just want to put that was my comment. I want to put that out there. We might be jumping the gun a little bit on this bill.
Yeah, Joanne, I think that's a good point. We don't know, but our understanding is that there's supposed to be another stakeholder meeting that the legislators are going to participate in. And so that's something, and I'd be happy to, on behalf of the group, is reach out to them and say, hey, like, the towing task force would love to be a part of that stakeholder meeting. And I suspect they would be fine with that. And so unless anyone has any objections to it, I'd be happy to reach out and ask if we as a group can participate in that meeting whenever that does happen.
I think that would be a great idea. Or maybe if we need to have a separate meeting, for this body, and of course it would be public, that might also be appropriate as well.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. We'll reach out and then hopefully get our emails set up. I'm a little nervous. I don't want to get in trouble using my personal.
Same.
Get those linked up. I'll communicate with everyone. I'll try to make that happen.
Okay.
Honestly,
so, yeah, sorry, there was, yeah, go ahead, John.
I just wanted to say that it's just a draft right now. And with a draft can change drastically. It can also not even be introduced. I have a meeting at 3:00 with that. So I think by the next meeting, we would have more of an idea. Is there an actual draft or is there an actual bill? We don't even know yet. So I think, yeah, it's a little premature. I mean, I like the direction. I think it would be great to have the task force as a, part of that. But at this point, I think we're a little ahead of the cart.
Hey, John, do you have the, I can't remember. I saw someone put a comment up that asked if we had like the name of the bill or something that someone can maybe Google. Is it online right now?
It's not a bill. It's a draft still. And
Draft.
I had the first version of the draft. I don't even know if that's the same draft at this point.
Yeah.
Because it was the very first draft that they made the draft in August. They brought it to the Towing Association 2 days before Christmas. So we got to talk to them. I think it was the 3rd, 4th, 5th. It was about the 5th of January is when we were actually able to talk to the sponsor and try to explain to them they were in left field on it. So hopefully they'll want to sit down and talk with the association, but that at that point that hasn't happened yet. So the minute we get a bill or a draft that they really want to go with, I imagine I can get that information to the task force and it'll be a public record at that point anyway.
Great. Okay. Yeah, we'll do that, Joy. And thanks for bringing that up. That's a really good idea. I'll connect with the sponsors and see if we we can have a meeting with them directly, or if nothing else, just at least make sure we as a group are participating in that stakeholder meeting. That's a great point. Thank you. Michael, I see your hand up.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify, there will be a new version of the bill. I know there's additional language that's being proposed. And last I heard, the goal is for the bill to come out on the 8th in February. So our meeting might not be. It would be at the bill drop potentially, but might be worth talking to the sponsors to talk about timing of the bill.
Yeah, and yeah, in that case, I'll make sure I do it. We try to do that sooner rather than later, for sure. Unless anyone else has any items or questions or anything, I think we might be ready to wrap up. But does anyone have any kind of final questions or comments or anything real quick?
Just one thing. We had a question put in the system by Kayla. She was asking if she could volunteer for the task force. Just to clarify, while we are all volunteers, technically, we actually were appointed. Most of the people you see here were appointed by the governor. And then we have two. One was appointed by the chief of the Colorado State Patrol. The other was appointed by the Attorney General. So it's not something you can just volunteer for. It's something where there's actually appointments and things like that. Slots will open up in the future, which you could always apply for through the governor's boards and commissions website. But right now, it's a full towing task force and not accepting any new members at this time. But thank you for your inquiry. And then lastly, just to let you all know, I'll be sending out a calendar invite for the next meeting coming soon. For now, I think I'll just plan to use this same medium for the next meeting. That might change based on some feedback that I'm getting from certain people, but for now, we'll just plan on that. I'm hoping to send that out after the new state emails are in place. I'm hoping that'll be a quick turnaround. I'm going to meet with our Deputy Executive Director this Friday to ask about the status of that. Hopefully that'll be something coming up here soon, and then the flow of information should be a lot better than it is now once those are in place. So that's all I have, Trevor.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, everybody. Like I said, really appreciate it. I know everyone's got jobs and families and responsibilities, but this stuff's important. So we really appreciate, I really appreciate you guys getting involved in everything, and I look forward to speaking to everyone soon.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good day.
See you next month.